Hello everyone, welcome to the video. My channel name is College Football Frenzy, and today I'm going to be talking about the best national championship games to ever occur from the start of the BCS era to the present. So the BCS era started around the late 90s, and I'm going to be talking about the best championships from then on to now. The national championship, usually in the past there's been a lot of blowouts. Most of the time the national championship games, at least especially the last two ones, haven't been extremely exciting, but there have been a few national championships during the 2000s, the 2010s, that were pretty fun, pretty exciting, pretty back and forth games. So I decided to do the 5 best national championship games. There's probably about 6 or 7 national championship games overall that were entertaining since the BCS era started, but most of them, like I said, weren't great. So I'm going to be talking about the ones that are. I'm going to get into it right away. I'm going to start off with number 5. I'll do an honorable mention right before I get to 1. Anyway, I'm going to get right into it. Number 5, Clemson versus Alabama, the 2017 College Football Playoff National Championship game. Now, this game was actually a rematch of the national championship game the year before. 2016, Alabama had beaten Clemson. Coming into 2017, Clemson was an underdog, I believe, for the second straight year in a row against Alabama. Most people expected Bama to repeat as champions. They had a lot of talent. I believe it was Bo Scarborough. He was very good for Alabama, and they had Jalen Hurts, a freshman at quarterback. So they had a lot of weapons. On the other side of the football, obviously Clemson had one of the best quarterbacks in college football history, Deshaun Watson, and he had plenty of other weapons like Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow was probably the biggest impact in that game. He got a few big touchdowns, most notably the game-winning touchdown with only a second left to go in the game. It came down to, I believe, a first down and goal with 6 seconds left. Watson had Hunter Renfrow wide open in the end zone and threw the game-winning touchdown. It was a great national championship game. Alabama, I believe, started off with like a 14-0 lead. It might have been something like that. And Clemson came back. It went back and forth in the fourth quarter. Jalen Hurts scored a running touchdown with about 2 minutes left to go in the game, and Clemson drove down the field and ended up winning it. So it was a great game overall. There couldn't have been a better time to be clutch if you were Hunter Renfrow. With only a second left, he caught the touchdown pass. So it was a great game overall. I feel like the star of the game itself wasn't incredible. That's why I have it at 5. I like to judge national championship games not just based on the ending. I like to include big plays, how, back and forth it was, even through the first half. So I put this at 5 just because I believe the star of the game wasn't fantastic. 4. The 2016 College Football Playoff National Championship game. Alright, so this was the year before the one I just talked about. Great game, very back and forth. The reason I have it at 4 instead of 5 over the other Clemson-Alabama one was because, like I talked about, I feel like this one had a few more bigger plays, even though the ending wasn't incredible. It had bigger plays, including the onside kick for Alabama in the fourth quarter. That was a huge onside kick, probably the best kicking moment in Alabama Crimson Tide history, to be honest. It was back and forth. I think Clemson got out to an early lead, but Alabama came back and forth the whole way. It was a high-scoring game. Alabama ended up winning 45-40. Clemson at the end scored a touchdown to make it close, but at the end of the day, Alabama was able to recover Clemson's onside kick attempt and win that football game. But it was an absolutely fantastic game. I believe it was Derrick Henry. He was the Heisman Trophy winner coming into that game. He was a very big weapon for Alabama. Major reason why they won that football game. So he was a big weapon too. But overall, it was a great game, back and forth, in my opinion. Number 3. The final ever BCS National Championship. This is the 2014 Rose Bowl National Championship game. This is pretty much known as the most underrated championship game ever. That's what a lot of people call it as because it really is underrated. Many people forget about it, but this had an incredible ending. It had a comeback. It was just a great way to end the BCS era. Florida State came into this game as a favorite. They were undefeated, had one of the best teams of all time, at least in the BCS era. You had Jameis Winston, who was great. He had a lot of great targets like Kelvin Benjamin. And Auburn came into this game as an underdog from the SEC. They barely made it. I think Ohio State had to lose on conference championship week, and they ended up losing Ohio State. That's why Auburn got in. But Auburn had so many miracles coming that game. They had an early loss to LSU, and then they just ran the table from there on. They had a miracle at Jordan Hare against Georgia. It was like a Hail Mary on fourth down with like 30 seconds to go. That was a miracle. Then they had, of course, the famous kick six against Alabama. Crazy miracle. And they played a pretty close game against Missouri in the SEC championship to get there. So Auburn had probably a much tougher road than Florida State did. It was a great game. Auburn got out to an early 21-3 lead. Most people forget about that. Florida State stormed back. They finally took the lead again in the fourth quarter. There were a lot of big plays to end out this game. The ending was fantastic. I believe Florida State, when they were down against Auburn, had like a 90-yard return or something like that. And then Auburn came back with a minute 20. They go into the end zone to take the lead. And then Florida State, of course, Jameis Winston threw to Kelvin Benjamin with less than 20 seconds to go on first down the national championship game. They needed a touchdown. They got it. It was a jump ball, and luckily Benjamin was able to come up with it. But it was a fantastic game in my opinion. Both had great seasons. It was sad to see Auburn lose, but it was great to see Florida State win. Number 2, the 2003 Fiesta Bowl National Championship game between the Miami Hurricanes and the Ohio State Buckeyes. This is probably the biggest upset in BCS, BCS National Championship history. Maybe the biggest upset in any single national championship game in college football. Ohio State was big underdogs. I am an Ohio State fan. I wasn't alive for this game, but looking back on it, I can kind of understand why. They had a great defense, but their offense was not very good. They just lacked, talent, a lot of talent on the offense. The defense was great, but some of the games, they had very close calls throughout the regular season. They nearly lost to teams like Cincinnati, almost lost to Michigan. Purdue was close, came down to like a fourth down. Illinois. So they were big underdogs coming into this game. They had barely got in there. They were undefeated, though, still. Miami was from the Big East. They had won the national championship before with one of the most dominant teams ever. It was supposed to be Miami winning this game by quite a lot of points. They were a big favorite. They had only like one or two close calls that season, but they were still pretty much just as good as they were the year before. They had tons of future NFL talent. So it was setting up to be what many thought, another Miami national championship to continue that dynasty. Ohio State, though, had a fantastic game. They played great on defense. And it was a low scoring game. Most of their points came off of turnovers, and it was close throughout the whole way. Miami obviously played pretty good on defense too. They had a great defense. One of the key moments in the game was on third down when Ohio State had the football up 17-14, and one of the Miami defenders held Chris Gamble. The holding call was not called. Chris Gamble ended up catching a pass in bounds. Now, if he had caught that pass in bounds, it would have sealed the win for Ohio State 17-14 in regulation. But neither of those two things were called. The holding wasn't called, and the inbounds catch, it was an inbounds catch. Off a replay, you could see it, but they didn't have instant replay at that time. I believe instant replay came in the year after. So it was a catch, but they called it incomplete. They gave the ball back to Miami because it was fourth down after that, and Miami ended up sending it into overtime with a game-tying field goal at the end of the game. Now, in this first overtime, many people remember, obviously, it came down to an Ohio State fourth down play. It was fourth down, I believe, in goal. Ohio State needed a touchdown, obviously, It was a huge play, and they didn't get the touchdown. So people thought the game was over. Miami was already up 14-17 in overtime at that point, and people thought the game was over. But a flag came in. I believe Terry Porter was the ref. He threw a flag late after the play, and he called it as I believe it was a pass interference. Looking back on the play, there was pass interference. There was also a face mask, but a lot of people complain that in that moment it probably shouldn't have been called because there wasn't too much contact and it was in a big moment. Ohio State ended up winning 31-24 in double overtime with a great goal line stand. I do still think, though, to this day, the final score should have been 17-14 with Ohio State winning regulation because Chris Gamble did catch the ball in bounds. That does take away some of its greatness, the officiating, because if it was 17-14, it probably wouldn't be known to be as great as a game just because it was the first ever overtime game, I think, in championship history. That's what made it such a great game. So it probably should have been 17-14, the final score. But still, it was a pretty good game. Just a couple calls on both sides that hurt both teams. Honorable mention. I had to bring this up. I don't have it on my list. I think it's the sixth best national championship since the BCS era started. Georgia versus Alabama. The reason I don't have it at one is on the list is because they made a lot of mistakes, Georgia and Alabama. Alabama missed a couple field goals. It was a little bit of a sloppy game. Georgia was up 13-0 at halftime. The first half wasn't very exciting. Even the third quarter wasn't great. It really just came down to the fourth quarter. Alabama made a comeback. Obviously, Tua played great, and Alabama, one of the biggest plays in college football history. Tua threw on second down 26, a pass to Devonta Smith to win the game. So I have it as probably the sixth best national championship game of all time, but like I said, I consider all aspects, the start of the game, the end of the game, and listen, the end of the game was great, but I don't feel like the first half or even the three quarters was that exciting. So I have it at six, probably. This is just an honorable mention. I don't have it on the list, but it was still a great national championship game. And because of recency bias, I think most people probably have it in their top five, but I just don't think it was as incredible as some of the other ones on here. All right, so number one, without a doubt, this one was very easy for me to decide. The USC versus Texas 2006 Rose Bowl BCS National Championship game. Without a doubt, the best national championship game of all time. Maybe even the best college football game ever played. Definitely in the running for that award. What a game this was. Absolutely incredible. USC came in I believe as a pretty big favorite, but both these teams were incredible coming in this game. Both of these teams, people knew, were some of the best they had ever seen to do it. USC and Texas were both undefeated coming in this game. USC had won the last two national championship games, although one of those they did split with LSU. Texas, on the other hand, hadn't won a national championship game, I believe, in like 30 years, but under Mac Brown, led by quarterback Vince Young, they had an undefeated season. They pretty much bulldozed over everyone going to the national championship game, besides Ohio State. That was a very close game, but they ended up winning that game. That was a big one, and they finished the season undefeated and made the national championship game. USC was very dominant. They were led by quarterback Matt Leinart. He was the previous Heisman winner. They had running back Reggie Bush, who would become the Heisman winner for that year. So two incredible players. They had a pretty good defense, overall stacked offense, and they had a great coach in Pete Carroll. So many people, especially the media, because a lot of the media is from the LA area, the Southern California area. So many people, I think, were expecting USC to win, or at least wanted USC to win. Like I said, especially the media. But both of these teams, people knew were great, and it was going to be very interesting to see. It was supposed to be a high-scoring game, obviously, because you had two great quarterbacks. Good running game for USC. Vince Young himself was like a running back. He ran so much. So overall, it was supposed to be this great game. No better place to have it at the Rose Bowl. Texas had won the Rose Bowl the year before. Like I said, USC won the national championship the year before. So it was supposed to be this great game. Texas started out doing pretty good. They led, I believe, at halftime. They looked like the more dominant team in the first half. USC made a couple mistakes, including Reggie Bush. I believe he lateraled the ball to somebody else. That was a defining moment. The lateral ended up getting fumbled, and Texas recovered. So they started out they had the lead at the half, but it was a great first half. It was back and forth. Texas just was the better team in the first half. In the second half, USC stormed back. It was second half, third quarter was great. USC took the lead, and with about 7 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter, USC had about a 12-point lead. But Vince Young wasn't done. With about 5.5 minutes left to go in the football game, he stormed in the end zone for a touchdown that made it a 5-point game. It was pretty much up to Texas's defense then to stop USC and save the game and give Vince Young one last chance to win the football game. And it seemed like it was going to be a very hard task to do because obviously USC had a great offense. Texas defense was not incredible, but it seemed like it was going to be hard for Texas to stop USC just because of a dominant run game and a great pass game. It came down to a fourth down, and I believe 1 or 2 in Texas's own territory. It was around the 45-yard line of the Texas side of the field. USC needed a first down. If they got that first down up by 5 in Texas territory, the game was pretty much going to be over. They needed to stop Texas, and they got it. It was by like a foot. It was so close. They just got the stop they needed, and they gave the ball back to Vince Young with about 2 minutes left to go in the football game. Obviously, Young, the rest is history. He made an incredible drive. He took his team on his back, led them to the national championship crown. On fourth down, I believe it was 5, he ran into the end zone for the game-winning touchdown with about 19 seconds left to go in the game. It came down to one play on fourth down at the 9-yard line. It was such a hyped-up moment. It was incredible. And Young, pressure came. He just escaped, and he had the corner. He got it, and he ended up taking the lead for Texas. They got the 2-point conversion, and they won 41-38. Didn't leave much time for USC to make a drive with only about 19 seconds left to go. So it was a great game overall. Both teams fought very well. There really weren't any tough calls in this one. It was a pretty good officiated game. So overall, in my opinion, the game was just absolutely fantastic. I don't know how you could argue that another national championship game would be better than this. Listen, I'm an Ohio State fan. Like I said, beating Miami, that was a great game. I just don't think it's on this level. So USC, lost a tough one. They end up being good for a few more years. Texas made another national championship a few years later. They lost that. But still, overall, best national championship game I've ever seen. This was really before the SEC dominance. The next year, the SEC came into dominance. This was the last national championship game, I believe, for like 10 years without the SEC or the ACC in it. So it was a great game. Texas slightly edged out USC, but just looking back on it, it's so fantastic. It had so many great players, so many defining moments. But yeah, guys, that's it for now. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and I probably will be coming out with another video either tomorrow or in 2 days.